It's really easy for streamers to get lost in a sea of products when it comes to buying gear to upgrade to start out with, or to just use for their streaming. So today I've got a little buying guide for you guys to talk about the different products that I think you guys should get at every level. My name is Chris, this is Coalition Gaming, and today I'll be your stream technician. Real quick, if you're new around here, if you're into PC, hardware, tech, gaming, stream tutorials, and all sorts of stuff like that, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. We'd really appreciate it. Anyways, let's get to the video. If you're just starting out or you're just a streaming hobbyist looking for a decent setup, these are the things to get. First thing, a good USB microphone. Now, headset microphones have made strides in how good they sound, but to really have that setup, to really have that like feel of a streamer when you're doing this sort of stuff, a really good USB mic, especially on a boom arm, is definitely a thing to get. So with that being said, I like to recommend the Fifine K669B, especially because USB microphones are just simple. If you care about simplicity in your setup, a microphone like this is great. It has a volume knob right on it, so you can control the volume output of that microphone right on it. It has a really good swivel mechanism, and it is able to be mounted on a boom arm, so you could really isolate noises from tapping on the keyboard or tapping on the desk instead of just having a microphone sitting on there, which it would reverberate through. The boom arm really does help. But the microphone itself, in the test that we've done, if you want to watch that, by the way, it'll be linked right over here. It actually sounds really freaking good for 30 bucks. So yeah, that'll be linked down in the description below. However, if you wanted a microphone to carry forward in your streaming endeavor, there are two microphones out there that are worth looking at. That would be the Samson Q2U and the Audio-Technica AT2005 USB. Those microphones have both USB and XLR, and if you grow with your setup, that XLR is definitely going to come in handy. The Samson Q2U comes in at around $60, and the Audio-Technica comes out at around $90. So it's up to you what you guys think will be more worth it. They both sound really good, and you can't really go wrong with either selection. The next thing to get would be a microphone boom arm. I mentioned this previously already, but I'm just going to mention it again for importance. They can really help with canceling out reverberations through the desk and stuff onto the mic. So definitely get one of those. They also give you a bit of a pro look, podcaster look, streamer look. They're nice to have, and when you have the mic able to be pushed out of the way or just up on the stand like that, it's a good feeling. Additionally, if the mic arm comes with a shock mount and you can mount your mic into the shock mount on it, you'll be even better. Fortunately, they're not all that expensive for a basic one that can hold up most of these microphones. You're probably looking at spending anywhere between $8 to $15 for one. So as far as cost goes, this is probably one of the cheapest things that you can get that really helps overall. Now you're going to want a decent starter camera. And honestly, that comes down to the venerable Logitech C920. It can do 1080p 30, 720p 30. I'm not sure if it can do 720p 60, but whatever the case is, that's still fine. It looks good still, and if you're properly lit and you got all that going on, then it's definitely still a relevant webcam in 2019. Which is kind of sad considering that it came out like 7 years ago, but USB webcams are what they are. Right now, they usually go for around 50 bucks, so that's still not a bad price to get going. Now, the most important thing that you can do when it comes to trying to make your stream look good is lighting. A lot of people, they don't really pay attention too much to the lighting when they set up a webcam, and that can cause all sorts of problems. Right now, I have multiple lights turned on. I have a big studio light back over there. I have an LED panel over there. Then I have a lamp that's the same color as everything over there, just to get this to look good. I mean, I even have the ceiling fan light on to sort of light the top of my head. Lighting is super important when it comes to cameras, and they perform better with the more light you give them. Now, the way webcams work in their automatic modes is that the darker that your lighting situation is, the more it tries to adjust for that, and you get a grainier signal. It looks all sandy and grainy. It's not good. And then on top of that, your frames per second on the webcam will look terrible with bad lighting as well, because that's one of the ways it compensates. It runs at a lower FPS so it can bring in more light per frame to help make you look a little clearer. but that will affect the overall smoothness of that webcam's performance, and you don't want that. You want it to run at its 30 FPS so it's smooth and it looks good. You need good lighting. Now, you may have heard of the Elgato key lights. They're expensive. They do good for what they are, though, especially with the stands that they come with. However, there are other light options aside from that will do the trick. First would be the Hakutat's Super Slim Dimmable 5500K LED light panel. They go for around $26 on Amazon, and they get the job done pretty decently, I imagine. Nice white daylight 5500K LED panel. Won't take up too much space, and they also won't get too hot. The fact that it's dimmable is also helpful. Then there's also the Godox 3300K to 5600K LED panel. This goes for around $42, and this one is from a more sort of recognizable brand as far as camera gear goes. And it also is color temperature adjustable, so it's not just the one daylight color. You can also dim it, but you can adjust the color so you can have a warmer look or a cooler look depending on what you're after. Now, in both cases, you'll need a way to mount these, or at least to put them on your table, have them held up at a decent, height, I guess. And a tabletop tripod with a cold shoe adapter will get that job done. For that, I suggest the Craze Photo Portable Tripod. Goes for about $16 on Amazon. As a matter of fact, I use one to hold up my ring light back there, and it's pretty nice. It works just fine. But you'll need one for every light that you have in your setup, so keep that in mind. As well, the cold shoe adapter is about $8, so something else to think about. Definitely though, this is going to be the most important part of your stream setup. If you have to sacrifice the USB webcam, not the USB webcam, but rather the microphone in order for you to get the lighting done well with the USB webcam, and you're using your headset mic in place of that, that's okay. That's a good sacrifice to make for your feed and everything to look good. Okay, cool. So hopefully you've got some success at this point. Maybe you've hit affiliate on Twitch or otherwise have a following wherever you're streaming to. Now, maybe it's time to step things up. The first thing I would go with at this point now is a USB audio interface. This will let you start upping your mic quality and adjustability game. Utilizing the XLR port of your microphone, if you got the Q2U or the AT2005 USB or any other mic with the XLR port, this is the next logical step. Now, I generally recommend the Behringer Euphoria UM2, which usually goes for between $30 to $40 on Amazon when it's in stock. It has the ability to do phantom power, 48 volt phantom power. That's if you got a condenser microphone. If you guys want to see my review on a condenser microphone, a cheap one that still sounds good, make sure you click the link right up here as well. However, if that one is in stock, there is one that's the next step up, and that's the Behringer Euphoria UM22, which is about $50. And you can do a little bit more with that, have an extra input. It's nice, and it doesn't cost that much more. Actually, my bad, it comes in at $57. But yeah. At this point though, you will need an XLR cable to connect your microphone to the interface, and they run for about $10 for an Amazon Basics ones. That's what I use. They get the job done. Now, you might be thinking camera upgrade at this point. Well, I would say sure, it's an optional upgrade at this point. I think being at this level means you can still ride with the C920 or any other webcam at its level. However, if you wanted to start looking towards a mirrorless or DSLR camera as a webcam, you want to make sure you look into HDMI capture cards that will support that. The most common that you hear about is the Elgato Cam Link. However, there are other options like the AverMedia Live Gamer Mini, we can check our video on that one, or the Chert 4K-C, which you can also check our video on that one, also linked up there or down in the description below. Now, all these that I just mentioned go for around $120. However, there are cheaper options which we've also reviewed. Again, link up there or down in the description below. And you can probably go with one, let's say, off of Amazon. There's one from a company called Pango for about $80 that will do the same job. So might be something else worth looking into if $120 for one is a bit out of your budget. Now, you'll still need a camera to pair with this capture card if you wanted to use that as your webcam, and without a doubt, hands down, I'd suggest the Sony A5100, which is actually the one I'm using back there. It became my main camera not that long ago as well through a capture card. Now, the A5100 is nice because it's a flip-up screen where you can sort of monitor yourself, see how you sit in frame and all that sort of stuff. Full adjustability like any nice mirrorless or DSLR camera. Interchangeable lenses, so you can change the way that the camera looks, the angle, the shot, and all that sort of stuff. and more importantly, really good autofocus, because when you have a setup like this, you just sort of want to set it and forget it. And when it has good autofocus, you don't have to think too much about what's going on when you have your hand up in front of the camera. The camera you're looking at right now is my Lumix G85, and that could work in that situation. A lot of people like using a Lumix G7, but the problem with those is they don't have very good autofocus. So right now I have manual focus. My hand is now out of focus, and it's not going to adjust to my hand because I have it fixed to my face. Well, if I had, or I could do this and, my hand is still out of focus at this point. If I was using the other camera, I could go way back here and it'd focus on it. I could hold something up to the camera like you probably would on a stream, and it would focus on it. It's a really nice camera to use in that case, and you can get them on eBay for probably in the $200 to $300 range, as well as a decent lens. I'm using the Sony 16mm lens on there, f2.8, and that's another $120, $130 for that. So you could get away between $300 to $400 for the full camera, then another $80 to $120 for the capture card. So because this is kind of a bigger expenditure, that's why it's optional at this point of the game, where if you wanted to stick with your C920, you're still good to do that. But if you did go with the mirrorless or DSLR webcam, pay attention to the HDMI connection that it uses. Some use micro HDMI off of the camera, some use mini HDMI off the camera, and go pick a cable accordingly for that. The A5100 uses a micro HDMI cable, and I'll link one down in the description below, because none of this stuff comes with the micro HDMI cable. That is something you'd have to purchase to connect the camera to the capture card. And so now we're at what I'd say is the pro level setup. Hopefully you've found even more success. Maybe you've hit partner on Twitch, or maybe you're just getting a good enough following to where you feel that you really need to start upgrading your gear. And yeah, I got some suggestions for you too. Firstly is you want to upgrade your microphone. At this point, you can still get away with the other microphones, especially if you got one of the XLR models, but you really want to take things to another level at this point. And yeah, a good microphone can make a lot of difference. Now at this point, after everything that I've seen, everything that I've heard, there's only one microphone that I would even consider, and that is the Rode Pod Mic. It goes for about $100, and with a few adjustments to the EQ settings, you can make it sound as good as the Shure SM7B, which is a super popular microphone for huge streamers, including people like Shroud. It's a really good mic. The Rode Pod Mic can sound very nearly to that level. And when you're streaming, after about the $100 point, you really do start hitting like diminishing returns with your mic quality. The Rode Pod Mic can easily sound just as good as the SM7B with the right settings. So it's kind of a no-brainer if you're really trying to step up your game. It is solidly and well built though, and that presents another little issue. Now the issue it presents is that it's heavy, and the cheapy microphone arm mounts may not be enough to hold it up properly, so you may need to upgrade your microphone boom arm. A company called Ticino makes a heavy duty mic arm for around $50 on Amazon, and that should do enough to keep that mic up in the air and solid. So that'll be linked down in the description below. Now, of those microphone EQ settings that I mentioned, while you can get away with doing that inside of OBS, that mic will only sound like that when you're streaming through OBS. So a way around that is to do your microphone settings at bass, treble, things like that through an upgraded USB XLR interface. And when you're at this pro level, only one really sticks out, and that would be the TC Helicon Gaming Go XLR. Now the Go XLR is expensive. The big one is around $500. The small one is about $250. For $250 though, that small one still offers a ton of the features of the bigger one. Most of the usable ones as well. You can plug your mic right into it. You can make the adjustments that you need to. The faders on it that you can assign the different stuff to it, so you can control the different volumes that are that you're dealing with when streaming right on the interface as well, are super useful. If you guys want to watch more on setting that up, I'll link you guys to Alpha Gaming's video right up here. Super useful, super great, and you can't really do better than that for top level streaming when it comes to an interface. So that's it for the different levels of streamer gear that you would want, but that's just accessories and gear. When it comes to streaming, that's only part of the equation. The other part of the equation is if you're going single PC setup or dual PC setup, and what kind of gear would you pick for each of those types of setups. And now we're going to get into that. So if you're looking at a single PC setup, and this information applies across the board realistically, there are some important things to consider. So firstly, streaming is very CPU heavy. And whether you're talking about effects or just the actual encoding, it still uses CPU cores. There's a little bit of a caveat there, but I'll get into that shortly. So with that being said, if you're on a streaming system, you want 6 cores or 12 threads, basically a Ryzen 5 1600, 2600, 3600 or better as your minimum spec there. You're going to want at least 16 gigabytes of RAM, maybe up to 32 gigs, because a lot of the times all the extra stuff that you're doing with streaming will eat into your RAM and take it away from gaming a little bit, so a little bit extra doesn't hurt if you can afford it. But the more cores, the better when it comes to streaming. 6 cores is just what I'd say is the bare minimum to do things well enough. You could probably get away with a budget system with 4 cores, and I've done that. If you guys want to check out that video, it'll be linked right up here. But 6 cores, if you want a really good, sort of somewhat future-proof scenario, would be a 6-core CPU. I mean, obviously like an 8700K from Intel or a 9900K from Intel also would get the job done, and that's 6 and 8 cores. But yeah, that's definitely something that you're going to want to go after. So that caveat that I mentioned, that would be Turing. The NVIDIA Turing encoder on the 1650 Super and up graphics cards that was introduced with the Turing architecture, it is top notch. You can get nearly X264 medium quality out of hardware encoding on your GPU. The benefit of using the GPU to do the encoding is that it frees up the CPU for other things like your gaming performance. The best part about NVENC is that there's minimal impact on the performance while you're using it of your game. So I mean, our 1660 Super review covers that, as it covers gaming and gaming plus streaming performance using the NVENC. Make sure you guys check that video out right up there, or link down in the description below. So that caveat, NVENC lets you get away with weaker systems to do full streaming single PC, which is really nice. And the fact that you can start out with a $160 1650 Super to get that done is a godsend. So to sum up, at the starting point, I'd say 6 cores, 12 threads or better. That's a Ryzen 5 1600, 2600, or 3600. Realistically, the 2600 and even better, the 3600 would be the ones to get, as they have really great gaming performance as well as encoding performance if you go that way. 16 gigabytes of RAM, with 32 gigabytes of RAM being ideal, but 16 should get the job done plenty good. And I'd say a GTX 1660 Super or better, because when it comes to game streaming, you're going to want the best performance that you can get. Now, ideally, something like an RTX 20, let's say 60 Super and up would be better, especially if you're playing at 1080p, because it will ensure that your games, no matter the game that you're playing, are running at their best, and you still have that Turing encoder in case you wanted to use NVENC. However, depending on your budget, especially if you're looking at the $400 GPU category, the Radeon 5700 XT will provide fantastic gaming performance if you're going to be using CPU encoding. So now let's get to the 2PC setup. Things are a little bit different when it comes to this, because you're going to want the most powerful system that you can get, quad-core or better for your gaming PC. The most powerful GPU that you can get, again, I'd start at a 1660 Super or better, but you can definitely get away with a lower class GPU like an RX 580 or a 1650 or whatever you have there for streaming, because the best part of the 2PC streaming setup is you're offloading a majority of that load onto the second computer to do that heavy lifting, which ensures the gaming performance on your main PC stays tip-top. So whether you're capturing your main feed on the second PC via NDI or a capture card, the rules are still the same for the specs of that second computer. Now, because all that second computer is going to be doing is encoding, you can get away with not necessarily having the greatest of specs on it. I've talked about the basics of a streaming computer in a video that'll be linked right up here down in the description below. And yeah, so basically you can get away with the 4-core 8-thread, but realistically, let's start at the highly affordable, again, Ryzen 5 2600, currently $120-ish on Amazon. The 3600 is also an option, and then there's obviously the 8-core versions. That could be the 8-core Intel or AMD, whatever you can afford, whatever you think is best. However, in terms of value, Ryzen is hard to beat. More cores the better when it comes to this, because if you're using a second PC to do the encoding, CPU encoding all the way would be great. I'm going to link some CPU encoding options, not link, but actually have them typed out for you down below, as well as a video that talks about the different options you could use to make X264 encoding look better. But it's really easy to input, so you'll see. Now you can get away with 8 gigs of RAM for your streaming PC. It doesn't need to have a whole ton of RAM, 8 to 16 gigabytes, and you'll be fine. However, if your budget was a little flip-flopped when it came to building that second computer, you could use NVENC. The GTX 1650 Super has the Turing encoder, the same encoder that's on the majority of the cards in that lineup. So if you had just like a spare little cheapy CPU lying around, little quad-core, little Xeon system or anything just extra that you could put another GPU into, you can slap a 1650 Super right into that sucker, turn on NVENC, and use that as your streaming PC, and it will do the job just fine, which is actually super nice. Being able to get into a 2-PC stream setup with a spare computer, just upgrading to a relatively affordable GPU is not something that you could have done in the past. So it's really nice that you can do this now. And there you have it. But that's not the end of things. So I got some closing thoughts on that. Let's get into them now. And that's what I feel is a pretty good guide for the different levels of streaming when it comes to whether you're starting out, whether you're a mid-level streamer, whether you're at the top, pro level, anything like that. Obviously, there's way more stuff you can do, especially if you factor in wanting to do stuff like a green screen setup. Green screens are fantastic, but they're definitely not necessary. You can use other things like XSplit Vcam to do background deletion, which we've also done when I do on almost every stream. That'll be linked right up here if you guys want to check that out. But it's an optional thing at every level, so that's why maybe I didn't mention it at every level specifically. Now you can do awesome stuff with the green screen, like what Dr. Disrespect does with having really awesome custom backgrounds to make you look like you're in different places. Or you can just make your room look nice, so your background is a nice room with some RGB floodlights. They're not expensive, they're 10 to 15 bucks. You can do some cool lighting stuff with them, and that'll really spruce things up. But with all that being said, there is still more to do when it comes to your actual stream setup, and we have plenty of videos on that. There is an NVENC setup that you have to follow in order to get the NVENC set up properly and to do its best job, as well as X264 OBS settings if you're going to do CPU encoding. So a lot of things to consider, a lot of links down in the description to cover all this stuff. Make sure you look it down in the description below for links to everything, as well as links to all these videos, because there's so much more that can be said that there really just isn't time in this one single video to cover all of it without going for like 40 or 50 minutes. Anyways, what kind of gear do you guys have in your stream setup? Anything that you would swap out or anything that you would suggest against what I've suggested? Let's talk about it. Drop a comment down below and we'll get this conversation started. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this video with all your friends. We'd really appreciate it. My name is Chris. This is Coalition Gaming, and I've been your stream technician. Bye.